Stirling, welcome to the show and welcome to Glasgow.
It's great to be here, mate. Yeah.
And we were talking before we hit record, beautiful city, but in a little bit of a decline, which is a shame.
It is a shame. I mean, I was given kind of a false impression of what Glasgow would be like from movies like Trainspotting. Going to be honest, and I had a few Scottish mates.
That's more Edinburgh. But
okay,
yeah,
maybe
I'm on board.
I've already committed a faux pas. I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought it was going to be a bit. Everyone who I know who comes from this part of the world was like, oh, Glasgow's like the Glaswegians are rough and tumble, and they'll all say that the people make Glasgow. Which I thought, that's a pretty interesting take on the place. So it's good. I've only been here for 24 hours, but it's beautiful. Yeah, I like it.
We'll get some culture after this as well.
Oh, excellent, great.
Yeah, I can promise you that, and we'll discuss that if we'll maybe disclose what that's going to be on the podcast. But for today, I really wanted to join the dots between you growing up in a 3,000 person farm town in Australia and becoming a world renowned porn star.
Right.
How on earth did that happen?
How on earth did that happen? Yeah. How deep into the psychology you want to get? I never saw. I think a part of my obsession with my curiosity for sex and understanding the opposite sex as well came from my parents. Never showed any public displays of affection towards each other. Not that they didn't love each other; they loved each other very, very dearly. But a peck on the cheek was the most I ever saw intimacy wise from my parents. So I think that. So when I sort of went through puberty and stuff, it sparked this just curiosity about what women are like, what interacting with women is like, and I got my first girlfriend, and it was just this really exploratory phase, and so that perpetuated eventually into just this sort of curiosity with the female form, obsession with the female form, obsession with sort of understanding female psychology and intersexual dynamics, and I used to do a lot of reading and a lot of studying around that sort of stuff, a lot of evolutionary psychology, big interest in that. And then it kind of got to this point. I was running a business I eventually moved to Perth, the capital city in Western Australia, and I started up a paleo meal delivery business, which we did it okay in a couple of years. We ended up doing $600,000 a year in revenue, which is not too bad for a city like that.
I wonder if the world was ready for that at this point.
Yeah.
I think maybe 2025 you would have more legroom for less ultra processed foods, etc.
Maybe. Well, paleo was kicking off then. It was we had one chef in Australia called Pete Evans, who he was going viral. He had his own TV show, his own restaurants and stuff. So it was kind of trending at the time, and we kind of jumped on that. Saw some people loved what we were doing, but Perth is the world's most isolated capital city, and so you're stuck with that populace. There's no expansion. It was interesting because we were kind of modeling our business off of a business that existed in America at the time. And they did vacuum sealed, pre-prepared meals and stuff. And they would ship them across the entire country for very cheap. And once I investigated into the shipping costs in America, it was it cost them $5 to get it from Florida to Texas to LA or whatever. And they looked at the shipping cost of doing that in Australia, and it was $150 to go from Perth to Sydney. I'm like, dang.
Our margins
are not quite there. It's just the logistic. Australia is subject to the tyranny of space. Everything in the country is so far apart, and because we don't have in America they have middle America. They have stuff in the middle, but Australia doesn't have that. So there's no logistical infrastructure set up to move goods effectively and efficiently across the country. So that we were kind of capped at how big the business could grow. Was putting a lot of time and energy into it. And it got to this point where I was sort of ready to exit. My business partner and me had some feuds, and we were ready to exit working together. And I got down to this point where I was like, okay, I sat down to myself, I looked at myself in the mirror and said, why am I doing this? What's the point? What is my ultimate purpose behind me wanting to pursue this business? And I thought, well, I want to make money. Cool. But why do I want to make money? I want to make money so I can travel around the world, have a good time, see things. If I was going to be really, really, really honest with myself, it's I want to travel the world and meet beautiful women. So I kind of thought, well, why don't I just cut the middleman out of this equation? Because I knew some girls at the time who dabbled in the adult entertainment scene over in Melbourne, and they put me in touch with a director over there. And I was like, you know what? I've just sold this business. I'm out of that line of work. I've got a bit of savings. I'm like, why don't I just have a crack at this and see how far I can go for shits and giggles? And I went all the way to LA, as a matter of fact.
Have you ever rubbed beef fat on your face? Sounds crazy, but that's what I've been doing since January with No Tox face balm. I've been really focused in the last few years on reducing the number of toxins that I take into my body, whether that's getting a filter for the water in my tap, whether that's removing things like heating plastics or drinking from plastic bottles. The skin is the biggest organ in the body, so it was about time I considered what it was I was rubbing on my skin, and that includes things like moisturizers and other potentially harmful chemicals. Since January, I've been using No Tox face balm. My skin looks and feels the best it's ever felt, and you can benefit from that too. The link will be in the show notes for notoxskincare.co, and you can use Cambro for 15% off. What does getting involved in the industry look like?
A lot of paperwork, a lot more paperwork than people think. Lots of STD testing. Health, like maintaining, like, you know, clean bill of health is super, super important. A lot of waiting around as the guy. You're waiting around for the girl to get her makeup done. You're waiting around for the lighting to be set up. You know, we just, you know, how long would it? Our man over here is very professional. Didn't take him very long to get this set up, right? But when you're shooting in like a, you know, in a house in LA in the suburbs or whatever, everyone's bringing everything in new. We're getting every shot for like all the dialogue and stuff. And the funny part about that industry is that you probably spend 3/4 of the day shooting the parts of that movie that no one watches, the parts that everyone skips through.
Oh, the build-up.
All the build-up is probably 3/4 of the day we spend on that, and then the last like half hour is the fun bit that everyone actually just watches. So every time someone skips through that, you just like
a wasted time.
It's a waste of time. I'm like, oh man, like some pornographer's heart breaks because they're all actually film school graduates. All of them. They're all classically trained.
I've heard you say this before, but they just haven't been able to get into Hollywood, so they turn their hand to the next thing.
Yeah, well, because it's so competitive. It's so competitive to get into Hollywood, right? And it's very much a case of, you know, who you know, not what you know. But all these guys who are directors and assistants and everything, they all come from the same film schools that the Hollywood guys do, and so they've got all the same skills, but they don't have a union, so they're the same guy who's the actual director doing all the filming. He's setting up all the lighting himself. He's getting on a ladder, putting up, you know, strapping something here to get a good shot. No OH&S, no health and safety regulations around it. He's allowed to do whatever he wants because he's not enforced by like a union that he has to hire a key grip or whatever it is. You know, so it's a lot more. I remember having this conversation with a friend ages ago who was trying to film a video course. It was trying to film a product, which would have involved like a few models coming in, writing stuff on blackboards and stuff. And I said to him, mate, get yourself a guy from the porn industry. You will film this in like twice as fast and half as cheap. They're staggeringly efficient with what they do because the whole industry is about going home. Everybody just wants to go home.
Get the content, leave.
That is the secret of that industry, of the adult industry. Everyone just wants to go home, get their paycheck and leave. They're fast and they're efficient.
How did you manage to build credibility to get all the way to LA? Because at the start, I guess you got introduced by some girls that were doing it in Melbourne. How do you build up and get a reputation?
Yeah, so it's a lesson in networking, really. And it might not seem like the best place to learn how to network properly, but everything this is not just that world, but every world is, you know, it's a sort of hierarchy of credibility, right? And I actually learned this. I applied the exact process I applied to make my way from like Australia to Los Angeles in the adult industry is a process I copied from a book by Ryan Holiday. And the book is called Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator. And in that book, this was written a long time ago now, but he was the head of marketing for American Apparel, and he was the head of marketing for a guy called Tucker Max, who wrote a
I remember Tucker Max, yeah. He's like very like repenting now. He lives on like a ranch.
Yes.
Totally is against pickup artistry and stuff that he used to be into.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. I follow him on Twitter. Yeah, he's cool. I like that. Like I'm heading down the whole ranch homestead route myself, so I resonate with that. But the way his marketing guy Ryan Holiday, who wrote this book, the way he described how he had so much success with launching Tucker Max's stuff was he deconstructed the blogging world, right? And this lesson applies universally to any, you know, field. So he would find like a super, super niche, small dating blog or something like that, and he would leak one of Tucker Max's posts to him, and he'd get him to write about it. but he would leak it from like an anonymous account and be like, have you heard of this guy? This guy's crazy, to get him to write about Tucker. And then once he's established some baseline credibility with this very, very small, tiny niche blog, he would then do the same process again to a slightly bigger blog. And again, to a slightly bigger blog. And eventually to now it would be like a YouTube channel, but back then,
a national publication,
a podcast, or maybe then like a national publication, like a Washington Post, a Huffington Post, something like this. And eventually you just work your way up this chain or up this ladder of credibility. And he was massively successful with it. And he was so good at doing that he to prove his point in the book, he went and pretended to be like some kind of expert like on pianos. And he wanted to see how far he could get by pretending to, just Ryan Holiday, like, I'm just going to make shit up and pretend like I know what I'm talking about. And he managed to get into like some of the biggest newspapers in America as an opinion, like an expert opinion on pianos, even though he's never touched a piano in his life. And it sort of exposed how that whole world of blogging and whatnot, at least then, to a degree, probably more so now, is run by things like clickbait and like the title of the article is the most important thing. What's going to get someone to click on that article, thus giving that blog ad revenue, right? And now we've got the exact same thing now, by the way. I've used this process twice. Actually, no, technically I've used this process 3 times.
Okay. Porn industry,
and then my job now, which is YouTubing, right? How do you think we're sitting here in front of each other, right?
Network.
Same exact process of networking. And when I started my YouTube channel, I was fortunate when I started my, I'm going bouncing all over the place a bit for you, sorry. I'm fortunate when I started my YouTube channel that I timed it. I couldn't have timed it better, like, because I was about to leave the industry and COVID hit and then OnlyFans launched at the same time. So everybody is sitting at home watching podcasts and blogs and then vlogs and things. And then this OnlyFans thing is hitting everyone's lips, and it's very controversial and everyone's talking about it. And I managed to reach out to a couple of big red pill YouTubers, Rolly Tomasi and Rich Cooper, and pitched them and was like, hey, I'm a fan of your work. I'm in the industry. I understand what this is about. I can give you kind of an insider's perspective. And those were my first 2 ever podcasts I ever did, which sort of catapulted me a bit. And then off the back of that, I ended up launching my own YouTube.
You basically skipped some of the stages of the early publications, went straight to industry leaders.
Correct.
But those validated you for appearances on any podcast now, really.
Precisely. So I actually keep a bit nerdy about this. I keep a spreadsheet of every single podcast I've ever been on, and then like everyone else who's I haven't been on yet who's contacted me. So I've got this. I look at it as like the YouTube world is like a Venn diagram of like different concentric circles, somewhat overlapping one another. And if this guy over here talks about like health and fitness, and this guy over here talks about dating, and this guy over here talks about like making money, right? There's going to be overlaps to some degree in their audiences. And so if you're looking to like grow your brand online, grow your podcast, grow your YouTube channel, whatever it is, there's a lot more people out there you can talk to than you'd think. Like, it's not like, even though my niche is basically dating, I don't just go on dating podcasts. I go on anyone who will have me on, because there's always some overlap between their audiences. And so I'm going to be exposing myself, with this example, to a whole audience of people who might never have heard of me before, but they might, and some of them might not care. Some of them might not like me at all, but there's going to be enough of a percentage of that who will. They'll find it curious and they'll stick around, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting how that model works. And I think when you've seen you repeat it across numerous different industries, it's quite reassuring that if you had to start from zero again tomorrow in another industry, you would say, oh, well, I'd probably take the approach just like this.
I would do the exact same thing. I would do the exact same thing. And that's coming back to the original question of how I sort of made my way in the adult industry. I started with this very, very small studio in Melbourne. They knew somebody in England. I came out to England, and then they got me work with somebody else, who got me work with somebody else, who got me work with somebody else, and eventually I ended up shooting for Brazil. Like, that's the process. And then I knew someone in Europe who knew how to get me work in America, and then the process repeated itself. But it was just a case of like credibility, and like in that industry, it's very much a case of like who you know, because it's very competitive as a dude to try and get work, and everyone's thinks they can do the job, but they can't do the job, and it's a risk for the director to actually shoot you, because if you don't, you flop. If you flop, you know, you can't rise to the occasion, so to speak. They've just wasted thousands of dollars on a shoot.
A day's shooting time.
Yeah.
They haven't got the product. They're not ready to release.
Precisely. So it's like and I remember watching an interview from George Clooney ages ago. So George Clooney, when he first went to Hollywood, he was going to interviews, so he was going auditions. He was going to auditions and he wasn't getting work. And then someone said something to him, and he changed his perspective of the value proposition going into that interview. And he said he went into auditions from that point onwards, understanding that he is there to solve the director's problem, because the director has a problem, and the problem is he needs someone to do this exact role for him in the most spectacular way they possibly can. So rather than it being a case of him coming into an audition looking to take something from the director, he can give me a job, he can give me a role. He approached it from that completely different perspective of, I can solve your problem, Mr. Director. And I took that and ran with it in the same regard when it came to getting shot in the industry. Is okay, well, here's a problem, is that he can't find someone who's reliable, he can't find someone who's professional, can't find someone who rocks up on time, heaven forbid. Some little subtle things of just being a bit more professional, taking it like a job. Being charming helped a lot. Like if you get along with the director, he's going to shoot you more. He just likes hanging around, he likes having around the set all day. And if the girls like you, same thing. Like if I make the director's job easy, I keep the girl happy or chill or like on time and on point or whatever. He's like, great, he's doing half my job for me. Fantastic. I'll get him back.
We'll have him
again.
back.
Exactly. And that was the process. It wasn't that, it's not rocket science, but I think I was one of the few guys who approached it. That was one of the newer guys in my scene at that time who was approaching it like that, and that's why I had so much success.
Hormozy talks about 20 minutes of preparation can make you seem like a genius.
Right.
You're almost talking about like an ounce of professionalism makes you seem like the best person to work with in the world, because you just turn up and you deliver as you would be expected to. But you'd be surprised that across so many industries, how many people are flying on the seat of their pants and just winging it.
Yeah, very much so. Even something as simple, I think this might also be a Hormozy thing as well. But I remember it was either him or someone else talking about just write things down. Something as simple as that. Like I told you before, I have a spreadsheet of all the podcasts I've been on and who have contacted me. I've got another spreadsheet for this podcast tour I'm doing right now, and I've got all my dates lined up. And it's just taking notes. It's so simple. Like I know so many guys who do YouTube and do podcasting, do what I do, but I guarantee they don't write it down. I guarantee they don't have a spreadsheet of just like everyone they've ever, like everyone in their contacts list, like all the guys they know in this YouTube world. Guarantee they don't have it.
Yeah,
it's not hard.
My podcast sits alongside my sales career and my sales coaching now, and I have an Excel that I treat like a CRM for guest outreach.
Right.
And I've had guests that my podcast at the stage it was at had no right to have, just because I can write really good outbound email because of sales, but two, I tracked it and I had a consistent follow-up process. And
Nice.
the values in the follow-up very often when you hit somebody a second time. And as you say, by treating it with a level of professionalism, almost 300 episodes in now, I've grown far faster than a small podcast out of Glasgow would be expected to, because I treated it with a level of professionalism that is maybe not warranted, but I decided to anyway. Like if you want to behave like Chris Williamson or Divesy or all these big shows, then you should probably try and align your behaviors with how their team run things as well.
Yep, act as you mean to go on. Right, that's where you want to end up. So what business processes are you going to implement, or what are they?
Success leaves clues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely.
Talk to me what a day on set looks like in the porn industry.
Like I said, lots of paperwork. So you're filling out tax forms, you're filling out consent forms, you're going over the script, you're going over the shot list, basically, so you can kind of get an understanding of what's required of you. A lot of waiting around for the girl to finish her makeup. Then we have to shoot consent interviews, so the director will sit us both down in front of a camera before we shoot anything, and we'll go over like various consent questions and talk about do's and don'ts between each other. And they'll do the exact same interview again after we shoot it too. So you'll have both like basically. Is
that to cover the producer?
Completely cover the producer's ass, but in a way, it also covers my ass as the co-star too. There was a lot of in the last like couple of years of me being in the industry, like cancel culture and wokeism like really took over, and you had instances of women accusing co-stars or directors of crossing lines and doing things they didn't want done, and a lot of those cases were proven wrong and proven slanderous by the BTS footage and consent interviews that were done.
Well, thank goodness that was done.
Yeah, so that, I think a lot of directors got paranoid because they saw that and they're like, okay, we're going to make this sort of stock standard. We're going to do this across everyone. Originally, it was only done by originally only websites like kink.com who are BDSM stuff. They were doing it for forever, and then everyone just sort of started copying what they were doing because their stuff is a bit more extreme, you know. So you want, and they incorporate it as part of the scene. They want to make sure that like the people watching know that girl actually enjoys doing all this stuff. So it makes it much more professional. But yeah, so we filmed those interviews. Like I said, we do the paperwork, and then we basically got to wait for the director and the PA and stuff to set up all the lighting, get the first few shots done, and the day is basically like 75% of the day is like doing dialogue, getting shots, setting up the story, which everyone just skips in a funny way. And then we'll stop and we'll do stills, like we do the photograph stills that they use for promotions and advertising and stuff. And that's kind of like usually that's the first run through of anything sexual that'll happen in still format. So you kind of map out what you're going to do once the camera starts rolling. You do it in like changing positions, changing what you're doing. Then you get dressed again, and then you typically roll into the actual hardcore part of the actual scene.
And what are some of the misconceptions that people maybe have about being a porn star?
That it's a giant party. There's no like drugs on set. There's no alcohol on set. You have to be sober to consent to shoot. Now it's in California. There's an exception where a lot of the girls and some of the guys will do like weed, but they'll do it like off set, off camera, whatever. Before they shouldn't technically do it, but it does happen because it's California. They have a big weed culture there. But it's not like this big party where people are like doing lines of coke or something and getting hammered and then we're filming it. It's a lot more methodical, professional, because everyone's trying to not be sued. Basically, everyone's trying to avoid a lawsuit, so they have to cross all the T's, dot all their I's. And in terms of the shooting of the actual like scene itself, these days, because everything's tracked, everything is like MindGeek, the company that runs, or used to at least, that was a previous name, runs all these like big websites like your Pornhubs, like your.
They're a massive conglomerate, aren't they? They have a lot
of control.
Huge
conglomerate. They own a bunch of studios and they own a bunch of these what we'd call free tube sites. They're basically the Google of adult. So they have an infinite amount of data in terms of what gets people to watch and what keeps people on their websites and what makes people subscribe and pay for the paid versions of things. So we'll in the script of like, here's what we have to shoot today. Very often we'll get these sort of briefs on, we want you to recreate this, particular shot.
This is a high performing shot for click through to pay for the browser's membership or
exactly.
Whatever.
It's exactly that. So it's a lot more like analytical than people would give it credit for. And on my end, I'm not thinking about that, but the producer is, because his boss is paying him to do that.
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up the whole consent video thing, because a lot of people talk about girls being like trafficked into the porn industry. How visible was that for you?
In my experience, like I never worked with any girl who wasn't there of her own free will. Now, in I have heard of some instances in like Eastern Europe where girls will kind of they'd been, like you said, trafficked into it. My experience though, because I worked in Eastern Europe, I worked in the UK, I worked in Eastern Europe, I worked in America. My experience was more of one where the girls get, in Eastern Europe in particular, the girls get shot out, right? As in, their career isn't very long. Their career, like they get into it, they're a bit naive. That, to be fair, their managers are probably taking advantage of them in the sense of the manager isn't trying to give her a 10-year career. He's trying to make the most money out of her in about 6 months as he can. So he shoots her with every company he can, and then they do it again, but slightly more hardcore and pushing more boundaries. And then she's basically shot out within about 6 months. So
unless she wants to reinvent a crazy new category or something.
Yeah, and it's rough. Like there's not many. There's a few, but there's not many girls in terms of the number. If you look at every girl who's been shot in the last 12 months in Eastern European porn, and I mean like places like Prague and Hungary, like you probably won't see any of them again. The majority of them you'll never see their face again 6 months later. Like that's the speed of the industry there. America's different. America tries to the agents in America try to prolong the girl's career. They think of it as more of a long-term game. They will advise the girls on what, like, how to space out their career. If they're a good agent, they'll space their career out. So they got a bit more longevity. They can build more of a fan base, and they can capitalize off their fan base through things like, OF, or going to like expos and AVN awards and signing stuff and whatever, right? So, but in terms of like, in America, never saw anything resembling trafficking. In UK, again, never. And even UK doesn't even really have agents. So like, if you wanted to, if a girl was on set, like she's talking with the director, like, hey, can I, like, what days you got free? What do you need? What days do you need me for? He's reaching out to them. Like, so there's no like there wasn't even a third party there. And same with Australia. But Eastern Europe, there was like there was kind of a monopoly of agents. And so that's where, I wouldn't say it was trafficking, but it was, they didn't care about the longevity of the
They were chewed
career.
up and spat out a little bit
Very
more.
much so. Very, very much so.
From a fiscal perspective, Stirling, what's it like?
From a fiscal perspective. So the guys are making half what the girls are making. Again, in Eastern Europe, it was funny because like there was dudes were shooting for like 50 euros.
Wow.
So I would come in.
Maybe they just really wanted to be involved.
But they're locals who are living a much lower, like their cost of living is much lower. So I was coming in, initially charging like as a brand newbie, I was charging like 300 euros a scene, and I'm like trying to compete with these guys to like who are asking for 50, but because I speak English, but I was getting more work.
Well, you can play the dialogue better.
Way better than these guys could. And then I get out to America, and I'm making like 600 to 800 for a scene or whatever. And girls are like flat rate. Girls are making, like, in America, first scene is like 1,000, and then that can go up. That ranges from that increases anywhere from like 1,500 to like 300. Like, sorry, $3,000, depending upon like what they're doing. But it's not as much money as people think it is. It's really not. It's more of a volume game. Like, girls will shoot 20, 30 scenes a month easily.
Wow.
Like, if they're brand new, trying to make a name for themselves, they want the money. Like, they'll shoot 30 days a month. Sometimes a couple of days. Sometimes twice a day they'll shoot. But they'll push it. Now, guys, it's a bit harder for a guy to shoot that much.
We can definitely talk about performance as this goes, but that sounds
a lot more
challenging.
A lot more restraint on the body. Like, I got into it at like 30, so I was deliberately like holding myself back. I'm like, I'm not going to shoot like every day. I'm gonna want breaks. I'm gonna want days off here and there. Younger guys, they didn't have a problem with that. They could just go for it. But that fiscally, that's where, and then OnlyFans happened, right? OnlyFans kicked in. I think it was created in 2018 or maybe 2019. No, actually, earlier than that, 2017. And it didn't really get massive traction until 2020. And
the
now
lockdowns changed the game, didn't it?
It totally changed the fiscal reality of that whole industry, because now girls are not like, before it was a case of like these big studios were kind of like using the girl to make all their money. And it's kind of flipped now, where the girls are using a studio to boost their public image and their profile, get a bunch of fans so that they can make all the money. So it's really flipped that dynamic on its head.
It's like a democratization of wealth.
In a weird way, yeah. I guess you could say that, yeah.
That is interesting. And I think the world changed massively during that period in many, many ways. But with OF, it changed massively in terms of the access to scaling their incomes that maybe these stars had.
Very few women had their own like independent source of income prior to that. Like there was other platforms that were like OnlyFans, like little ones like ManyVids and a few webcam studios and things like that. Sometimes girls would like, diversify their income by doing that stuff. But for the most part, most of them just relied purely on the income they got from doing a scene. Now, some of the bigger stars would have eventually would have built their own like subscription website, their own personal website, and they'd shoot that stuff. And that's where a lot of girls who made good money prior to like around the 2000s, that's what they were doing. And then 2020 kicked in, and everyone like jumped ship and everyone went for the OF model. And now you got all these girls who were never even in, pornography.
They went straight to OF,
and they went straight to OF
just through their social medias.
Yeah, and then what ends up happening, and this is where the dynamic flipped again. Like a lot of those girls that blew up on OF, they're getting contacted by like a Brazzers saying, "Hey, we'll pay you this much money to do your first professional scene or whatever with us." And they like the leverage just completely changed. So it's made it really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. You describe yourself as retired and repenting.
Correct.
Why is that?
Because I don't think pornography is something that I don't encourage men to consume it, and I don't encourage women or men to get into that career. I don't think it is. I think it's pretty fair and objective of me to say that it has been a net negative on society. Like because it's kind of like a race to the bottom. Like we are, degeneracy has gone exponential in our society, where you've got girls like getting out of high school and their career prospect is like OF. It's not good for our society. It's not good for the family unit. You'll break apart the family unit with lots of that, because guys don't want to marry a girl who's had that kind of a past. Okay, like we've got a massive, like, you know, we've got a massive problem we will have a massive problem with men and women of that same age group. Like, who's going to marry who? What's going to happen? Are we going to have families? We're going to have a decline in birth rate because of that, decline of the families because of that. And in terms of just, yeah, like I said, degeneracy. Like, if you went out to a club today, not today because it's a what day is today? Monday, Tuesday?
Monday.
It's a Monday. I wouldn't go today. Went out 2 days ago to a club. You're probably going to see girls like dressed so scantily that you wouldn't have seen 20 years ago. It's just racing to the bottom. And
music videos is one of the big ones that people use as a measuring stick.
Yeah.
Like there was like maybe like certain Madonna videos in the 80s or 90s caused people like shock, but nowadays they wouldn't even bat an eyelid compared to, for example, like Cardi B or Nicki Minaj, who are like basically borderline nude and being extremely sexually provocative.
Very vulgar with the lyrics too, right?
That's right.
And it was funny. I remember seeing a comedian make a skit about this where he was like, there was this song going on the radio in America during Christmas time, which is like, "Baby, It's Cold Outside." And feminists were trying to claim that it was like, oh, he's sexually assaulting this woman, like by telling her to like not go outside in the cold, stay in and cuddle and kiss me, which is just called, you know, being charming. It's anyone who's actually dated a woman.
At some point, you need to shoot your shot and ask.
Exactly, like anyone who's actually been in a heterosexual relationship understands that dynamic.
They would have preferred if he produced the consent forms and went through it line by line and had both their lawyers there present.
Exactly. That's the fantasy world that they live in. So that got cancelled, but the most popular song of that year was Cardi B, "Wet Ass Pussy."
That's called female empowerment, I think, Sterling.
Yeah. Well, that's the irony of it, is that and I saw that consistently, like, because maybe not all, but 99% of the women in the adult industry would call themselves feminist and would label themselves as a feminist, right? And it's funny that they were sexually liberated, so they were liberated, they were empowered through putting their naked body on a screen, but simultaneously they're somehow a victim because they're a woman, I guess.
You can pick and choose which hat to wear at which time in that circumstance.
It's very convenient. So I was like, I obviously saw there was a massive logical inconsistency there, but they very often didn't.
I would say it's done harm to the feminist cause because the pendulum always swings back, and at the moment I think the pendulum is so far, and although I think it's moving in the right direction now, but it's so far to that side where female empowerment is twerking on the table of a nightclub to get free drinks, but God forbid somebody says, "Come down here, let's come home with me." That's an invasion of their privacy.
Well, it's gone to the absurd end where feminists are like forced to defend like trans men in women's sports. It's gone to this absurd end where it's like, and you get kicked off the plantation if you disagree. Like, you cannot question the status quo. You cannot question the party line. And I saw that a lot in the adult industry. There was it was very cancel culture.
Were you able to talk about your political stances?
Oh, not at all. I was a big Trump guy, and you'd go to set and like you'd hear people, because he was elected. He was the president then.
In his first term, 2016,
exactly.
2020, yeah.
You'd hear women just like, and not just women, guys and girls on set, like just whinging and complaining about Trump all day. And I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, yes. But like, he didn't do anything. Like, they created this boogeyman out of the guy, you know. And I just thought it was funny. And there was a couple of female porn stars actually who were pro-Trump, and they talked about being pro-Trump. And people just tried to cancel them, and you know, you can't work for this studio, you can't work for that studio. It's like, and it's the ultimate irony, because the whole industry is built off of the concept of free speech. Like, legally in America, it is literally enshrined with free speech legislation. That's why it's able to exist and operate. Yet these people are like, they're canceling you for for exercising free speech and having a different opinion.
You can have free speech, but only the speech that we like.
It's
very 1984,
it's
isn't it?
very much like that. And it makes sense because it comes out of California, which is where all the stuff comes from. But it's just this ultimate irony. It's interesting being someone with my political persuasion, like being like a secret Republican or whatever you want to call it, secret right wing guy in that industry at the time, and knowing that I can't speak my mind at all.
You mentioned the damage it might be doing to women who partake in it in terms of their, I would say, market value to men in the future and like how promiscuous they are. What about the damage it does to men who are consuming it?
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing that I haven't seen anyone else ever talk about this, right? So when you are in a aroused state of mind, it is actually a hypnotically suggestive state of mind. So your subconscious, when you are aroused and turned on, your subconscious is open to suggestion. That's another way of looking at that or phrasing it. Which means that whatever you are consuming, whatever is being put into your head whilst you are in that aroused state of mind, can affect you subconsciously. So basically, every time a dude is watching pornographic material, he's effectively programming himself to be a cuckold because he's watching another dude bang a woman and he's aroused in that moment. So he's reinforcing cuckoldry. And it's no surprise to me that we get that because of that, we've had the normalization or the attempted normalization of like open relationships and things like this, open on like one end but not the other one, another end, like where you get lots of these big Twitch guys and streamers and stuff dating like OnlyFans girls and things like that. And it's like, this is not in your best interest as a guy. It really isn't. But the only reason that they would accept something like that is because of there's some kind of subconscious programming going on there, which is against their evolutionary biological programming. Like men are designed to be like jealous and territorial. Like that's a normal, healthy response. You know, you want to mate guarding.
You should feel physically sick at the thought of somebody else with your woman.
Right.
100%.
Well, if you love her and she's your woman, absolutely. You know, it's this we protect what we value. You know, and so when that is eroded subconsciously, you're going to end up with a very sick society, which I think we currently have. I think we're in it. I think it's self-evident. Everything I'm saying, people might be like, "Where's the proof? Where's the proof?" Look around you. Like, I don't need much proof. I call it having a pair of eyes.
I know you understand this deeply, but I recently hosted a neuroscientist called TJ Power, and he was speaking about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, and in particular, dopamine is the effort hormone. People mistake it for the pleasure hormone, and again, you know this well. I've heard you speak really well on this subject. He was talking about how damaging porn is for young men for their drive and their effort, because to actually sleep with a woman requires you to go out and potentially face rejection, have to put in effort, have to work towards it, have to build up to it. If she's a woman of quality, you probably have to see her a few times to escalate. Whereas you can open your phone, have access to anything you want, jack off in however long it takes you, and then you're done. You've hit that climax that you have to normally, or you would have in our ancestral history, have to work really, really hard for. And the switch between the two of those and men embracing this ease is so dangerous for every area of life, because it permeates the effort they put into their fitness. It permeates the effort they put into their business. It permeates the effort they put into their relationships that aren't just sexual relationships, but their friendships and their family too.
Yep. And I mean, porn is a big problem with it, but other things like TikTok and endless social media scrolling have the same effect on that dopamine circuitry, have the same effect on that reward circuitry. Like, it's no surprise that younger guys are typically a lot more apathetic about things. They're a lot more, they want to be comfortable. They're afraid of that uncomfort. They're afraid of putting that effort in, taking a risk and getting rejected, like you said. That is life. Like that, we're living in this fake bubble world right now. This is not real. Like all of this stuff is like so artificial and so detached from how our bodies are actually designed to operate. Like, you can't. The human body is designed to be under stress. It actually responds positively to stress, both physical stress, hitting the gym, working out, right? But also like mental stress in the form of challenge. You respond positively to these things. And so the worst thing a guy can do to himself is live a life of comfort. It's the worst thing he possibly can, because he's going to rot his brain and his body. And everything is at our fingertips. If I want a taxi, I press this app. If I want food, I press this app. If I want to see a naked woman, I press this app. Everything is on demand, and there's no delayed gratification involved in things anymore. And that's when you end up with these problems with your fried dopamine receptors from mindlessly scrolling TikTok, mindlessly scrolling Pornhub. And we're wondering, and we're surprised when we hear that there's like a male loneliness epidemic and boys are getting left behind in education.
Yeah, academically. It's crazy.
So there is no surprise to me that these things have happened at all.
Well, it's all contributing factors.
Completely. And that's why I say retired and repenting. I'm like, look, since 2020, I've been telling guys don't consume porn. And I'm very proud that I've been very, very consistent with that message. And it's like, it's obviously the reason why. Like, yeah, like guilty as charged. I contributed to the degeneracy. It's my job to fix the damn thing, to fix the impact that I did cause, that whatever percentage of that industry I contributed to. I'm gonna keep using my voice and my platform as I grow and grow and grow to tell guys exactly this stuff. Like, here's why it's actually such a dangerous thing. Now, some guys go down that rabbit hole deeper than others. They get more addicted to it, they're more habitual with it than others. But at the same time, it's just not a good thing in general. Yeah.
There's a big rise of the no-fap movement online. Right. So that's no wanking for those that are uninitiated. And then, of course, you're a big advocate of no porn. Where do you stand between the importance of those two?
So there's a lot of science to back up the no-fap thing. I don't think it is. People can exaggerate it. They can make it out to be this sort of very esoteric, super spiritual experience that I don't necessarily think it is. But some basic stuff in terms of like testosterone levels, for example. If you abstain from ejaculation, you see your testosterone levels increase day on day up until a maximum of about 7 days.
I saw Huberman talking about that, and I saw the week was like the peak.
It's the peak, yeah, and then after then it plateaus, but you still do get the benefit.
I wonder how many guys are watching so much porn on a weekly or a nightly basis that means that they never reach that.
Yeah,
and we have a testosterone epidemic.
Yes,
it's dropping by 1% annually.
Yes,
in like 15-20 years, we might not have like the ability to
produce sperm.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're gonna have a baby epidemic because there's gonna be none. Yeah, it's really a problem.
I mean, there's loads that I'm doing. I mean, we brought our drinks today in cans, not plastics.
Yes.
I have a filter for the water in my tap.
Yes.
I take Tonka Ali. I eat limited processed foods. I train in a weight exercise. I get sunlight. I sleep. There's so many things that we have to do. But if you're doing those things and you're kind of like a self-development bro, the sperm retention comes as part of that too.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with the guys doing the whole no fap thing, no semen retention, whatever you want to call it. I think it massively improves your focus. I think it massively improves your willpower and your drive when you practice these things. It's just because if it's like if it was a habitual thing that you had in the past, it's just good to deny yourself things. You know, like that is strengthening a muscle of discipline.
Your start position matters, doesn't it? If you're a serial fapper, going to no fap is probably going to build a lot of time and energy into your day. Whereas if you're somebody who jerks off occasionally and has a slightly more in control relationship with it, you probably don't see the same crazy upside. You don't feel like you're floating, which is one of the things I see online.
Those are often, like you said, those are often recounts from guys who have had a massive problem in the past. And they've gone so far down the negative spiral of things that they're clawing themselves back. They're literally clawing their brain chemistry and their hormonal chemistry back out of this pit of despair. So they're doing it. It's a positive thing. I think like people make like Fap November, people make fun of it and stuff, and it turn it into this meme. But look, I don't care. It's good. It's a positive thing, and it's not just it's scientifically proven that it has a positive impact on you as well. You know, so it's positive. It's positive in like control. A physical component and in like this sort of mental, spiritual, comfort-based component.
Yeah, discipline equals freedom. So if you can discipline yourself equally, if you're not pleasuring yourself, you're probably more inclined. If that's a rule, you're going to have to go out and get it and actually pursue somebody romantically to make that happen.
Yep.
Whereas I suppose if you're always just dealing with it yourself, you maybe don't make the same effort to text the girl or say hello to the girl in the coffee shop or whatever that might look like, which is an increased level of effort.
Yeah. I always found something interesting when I was always better at like texting women after I hit the gym, and I think there's something to that, like because like I said, your body responds positively to discomfort, distresses like that, and I think that's a big part, like part of the pursuit, part of the chase, part of like that is the fun part. Is that it's not even, the fun part isn't even like going to bed with a girl, even though it's fun. But it's not the better part. The more exciting part of it is the chase, is the pursuit, is the unknown, the uncomfortable part where like, oh, you might get rejected, you might lose, but you're overcoming that discomfort to get a girl.
Yeah, I saw a study where they tracked guys approaching girls, and even the ones that didn't get the number still got a spike in their dopaminergic feeling,
right? Yeah,
because they made effort. So even if she said, "No thanks, I've got a boyfriend," or "Oh no," they still got something from actually going over and saying, "Hi, you're really nice. My name's Colin. Can I have your number?"
Yeah.
And then even if they said no, they still got some sort of improvement for that. So I want that should be like a compulsory module in school.
Well, you know what's fun? So I like when I was in my 20s, we did that. I was involved in like the pickup scene, what you would call it, right? Which was basically just a bunch of dudes like on internet forums talking about like their experiences going out to clubs and hitting on girls. And it was like, even, and you're completely correct with the example you just gave, like even if you don't get the desired result, you get a boost in self-esteem, because it's one of the most challenging, like it's probably the hardest way to actually get a woman, is what they would call cold approach, like walking up to a complete stranger who knows nothing about you and charming them is probably 10 out of 10 level difficulty, right? Versus like meeting someone through your social circle, meeting someone through work or through sports or whatever. Way, way, way easier to do it, right? Because there's a level of like, you're not a complete stranger. You might not be a serial killer. Like there's a bit, it makes it a bit easier. But that's why it was always so rewarding being able to do that, even if you weren't successful. So many guys transformed their life in that. There's so many guys who come from that, like who came from that world, who are like big like YouTubers now, big like self-help gurus, big business gurus and stuff like that now, because they just developed this massive discipline and massive self-confidence from knowing that you're the kind of guy who can push himself into those uncomfortable situations and handle rejection and just shrug it off and move on.
And rejection's such a painful feeling as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's biological. Like it's kind of like rejection from a woman is effectively her saying your DNA does not deserve to be replicated. Your bloodline deserves to end. That's kind of what she's saying. Which, I mean, it's not literally what she's saying, but like, you know, hindbrain, like emotionally, that's kind of why that feeling is there, you know? And you have to just give your brain the evidence that is not, like, it's not death. Because it kind of feels like that to like a guy who's just trying it for the first time. So you have to give your brain enough reference experiences of this again and again and again and again, so it knows like it's okay, like you're gonna be fine, and you learn to deal with rejection in a funny way. You learn to actually enjoy it. You learn to get a boost of self-esteem from like taking that rejection head on.
Totally
and that applies. And if a guy can do that with women, he can do that with cold calling. He can do it with sales. He can do it with networking. He can do it with anything.
It's funny you bring that up, Sterling, because I gave a presentation in January at a property networking event, and it was on sales and communication. And one of my 5 principles for a sales mindset is embrace rejection, because you must just keep going. The only thing I'll say that makes it slightly less sexy as a tagline is that I use at the end of the week or the month or the quarter, however often, to review what my approach was like, and I can refine it based on the rejection that I've got. So from a sales perspective, maybe not from a cold game perspective, but you could review your DMs and see, oh well, no wonder I didn't reply to that. That was awful. Or look at my Instagram profile. Right. It needs work. So embrace rejection and just move through it and keep going. Don't let it discourage you. Yep. But use the rejections to maybe inform how you improve on your process moving forward.
Yeah, be a bit analytical and
get the spreadsheet out, bro.
A little bit, yeah. You might have to get the spreadsheet out. Look, I think people do. I think guys do that instinctively without even thinking. Like your brain computer is doing that with the way you interact with women. Like if you're a guy who doesn't know how to socialize, was very bad, like very nervous, very socially awkward or whatever, and you're trying to learn how to be charming, how to be socially normal or less awkward. Eventually your brain, your own brain is going to figure out like saying this thing it makes girls awkward. Like versus saying this thing or behaving in this way or acting this way or holding myself this way or this kind of body language gets a positive like reception. So it's even if you don't consciously write it down, your subconscious mind is taking note of all these things simultaneously.
Yeah. I know you spoke to Connor Beaton before. I had him on the show last year. His podcast Man Talks is absolutely fantastic. And one of the lines of his book is a man's work begins in pain. And my worry is that many men avoid all forms of pain now through things like porn, vaping, social media.
It's escapism.
That's right. Escapism and sedation
Yeah.
is the two key terms that always come to mind for me. How can we encourage men to move away from that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to like if you have someone who's so sedated that he's just like he's infinitely always just comfortable. Like, how do you convince that guy? Hey, like you actually should feel like really uncomfortable for a bit. Like, no. What do you mean? No, I'm happy just sitting here like on the couch doing like playing my video games like for a stereotype, right? Get my Uber Eats, whatever. Like, that guy, I think, has to reach a point of despair, because if he like it sucks to say that, but things have to get so bad that he realizes like the hole he's put himself in. Because if he's just this is the danger with comfort. Like if when I eventually have a son, he's learning like stuff the hard way. He's not like I can't give him a comfortable life because the world around us is trying to lull him into this sedation, trying to lull him into this comfort. So I have to deliberately make life hard, like we're living on a farm. Like, cool, go milk the cow in the morning. Like if you want milk, go milk the cow. Stuff like that, right? But the average guy now, he's just going to have to get to this point. This is why a lot of guys turn their life around from having their heart broken. So many guys have taken like a horrifying heartbreak, a really brutal breakup, and that's what catapults them into their like 7-figure business. That's what catapults them into being a professional or being an expert or having a new career or whatever. So you need the pain, and it's like it's hard to kind of artificially engineer that pain if life is so easy and it's so comfortable. But they're going to eventually have to. They'll get there eventually. The problem is, do they get there in time? Because it's much better if they get there at like 16 than if they get there at 40.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my worry is with the generation coming through that they're so sedated that they can't pull away from it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys on the internet talking about this kind of stuff, friends of mine included, that, I think a lot of young guys are paying attention to, and they're switching on and they're waking up, which gives me hope. It makes me optimistic.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The pendulum's swinging back from where we were. It's just as long as these voices through things like X, which is much less censored, and thankfully your YouTube channel, which is surviving,
We're still there.
by a thread potentially sometimes. Yeah. At least it's hitting people with the content that might help them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a big part of the reason why they try to ban a lot of guys who talk about a very positive masculine message, is because they make for great consumers. If they're not a perpetual consumer, well, they can't make money off of them. So if you're going to take a whole generation of young men and convince them, maybe you shouldn't be, using Uber Eats every night. Maybe you should actually learn how to cook some food for yourself. Maybe you should actually learn how to make money for yourself. Maybe you should learn a bit more about tax and about how to like pay less taxes so you're not a tax slave, you're not a debt slave. Maybe you should learn about interest and credit rates and things like that, so you're not a debt slave, so you know how to build a credit score. All these little things. Like, an uninformed populace is good for business.
Docile.
Yeah, it's so much easier to direct public consciousness when guys are in that really comfortable, sedated space.
Did you have furlough in any of the countries you were in during the lockdown? Furlough, it was called. So in the UK government gave businesses 80% of somebody's salary for them to stay at home during the lockdowns.
I was in America when that happened.
Okay, well, they had stimulus checks there.
Yeah,
same thing. It was a bribe to stay home and shut up.
I didn't take the stimmy.
Well, of course you didn't. You've got principles. But there was furlough where stay home, wear a mask, protect the NHS or whatever the lines were. That was a trial run for UBI, Universal Basic Income. Right. And my worry is that people who accept a level of comfort, and again, the mass psychosis was so hard during C19. I'm not blaming people for taking furlough if their income had been turned off. I understand why you did it, but that was a test run to see if people would stay home and be obedient. To some extent, they took advantage of circumstances. And my worry is if we are in this sedation where people are drinking, smoking weed and vaping and watching porn and Uber Eats to the door and never training and, I'll just watch my lecture online today. I won't go to the class because it's all delivered to my laptop. That they would be prime candidates for. Okay, we'll all just get £28,000 a year and live on that and just not do anything.
Yeah, but I don't see a society where that is sustainable though. Like I don't like you put all of the people who would otherwise be like productive members of society on UBI. Your economy, you're like, I mean, we're already living in an economy where it's basically just inflated to all hell, and we're just printing money left, right, and center. Like, and the money doesn't actually have any value anymore. It's not it's backed by debt.
It's based.
It's backed by debt. So it's like, I can't. Where does that world end up? You know, it doesn't end up in a place I like. Hence why I'm running away to the countryside. I'm so pessimistic on cities these days. I'm like, yeah.
I can understand why.
I have to come to cities to do my job, but yeah, I don't like living in cities.
You dip in and out, and then you go out to nature.
Right. Like something, just little things like the lack of light pollution, the amount of I've been back home with my dad in the southwest of WA recently, and I've never slept like this I haven't slept like this in years. And it's just little things like this like you look up and you just see stars. There's no light because there's no traffic lights in my town. It's tiny. There's barely on there. And it's little things like that. And yet after living in like Miami for like 3 years, I'm like, oh shit, this is what it feels like to have a good night's sleep again. You know, it's little things like that. And I think I think we're getting towards this sort of turning point where people are either going to, and I think we're seeing a lot of it already. People are gonna veer towards like a more traditional way of living, where they're going to escape cities. We're seeing a lot. COVID did a lot of this. COVID pushed a lot of people into, like, in America, especially into like the whole homesteading route. I'd like to see more Australians go down that route. Unfortunately, in the UK, there's not really much land left, so it's a bit harder to do something like that. But, you know, there's plenty of rain here, so you can still grow stuff. But I think rejecting modernity, rejecting this piling on top of one another in cities and, like, you know, living off benefits and living a sedated life versus proactively seeking out a harder but more healthy lifestyle. I'm seeing, at least, maybe I'm just the parts of the internet that I like to follow, I'm seeing people being pushed more, adopting that way of life more. And I think, and those people who take that way of life are the ones who are going to have kids. The ones that's who's going to make more of the population.
Yeah, agreed.
You know?
Talking of having kids, how did you pivot to being a bedroom coach?
That was ending porn in like 2020. COVID lockdown hit. Couldn't shoot, and I'd already been writing a book like 6 months prior to that, oddly enough, and it gave me this push to, like, you know, it was a case of like, oh, I want to add another chapter about this. I want to add another chapter about that. It was never finished. It would have been one of these things that never got finished, right? I'm sure people can relate to having a project like that. And I had a really good friend, and he was like, mate, just publish it. Just do it. Like, I'm like, oh, but I want to add this. He's like, no. Save that for another book. Just put it out there. Do it now. And so I took his advice and did it. And because I couldn't go shoot. So I'm like, well, I need some way to pay the rent. So let's try this. Let's see. I'll use the audience that I've built, and I'll see if it makes money. Did a podcast with Roller. Did a podcast with Rich Cooper, and within a month, I was making more money off of that than I had made previously doing, like, going to shoot, going to set every day. And so that's when I started to pivot. I started to pay a lot more attention to what guys were messaging me in my DMs, like questions that guys were asking me, questions that guys had been asking, like other like performers in the industry, like the very common questions they get on whenever they're interviewed on YouTube or whatever. And I just started seeing more and more and more, like, just opportunities to solve problems for guys. And that was kind of what led me down the path. I was like, okay, well, look, there's no one like catering, in my opinion, there was no one catering to this area of problems around bedroom performance, in a way that came from, like, practical experience.
I was going to say, you have the expertise to discuss this.
You know, like not only do I know how to fix the problems, but I've proven that I've fixed it. Like, I've done it under pressure. You know what I mean? So it's one thing hearing from, like, you know, a urologist, hey, you should do these sort of things for, you know, for erectile dysfunction or whatever, right? There's that's one side of the coin, and then there's like me, who's like, not only have I looked at that advice, assessed it, and applied it, here's a whole bunch of other stuff that I've done practically, like other guys in the industry have done practically to, like, biohack themselves in a way to get the job done.
Yeah, because you have a a chemical pharmaceutical background as well.
A double degree in chemistry from the University of Western Australia. Yeah.
So you know about this stuff more than just experimental stuff.
Yeah, like I know how to sniff out bullshit science. I know how to read journal. I'm actually a published scientific author. I was published before I was a graduate.
Under your non-stage name, I assume.
Correct. Yes.
There we go.
And so, yeah, I know how to read a journal article and understand and extract like.
We won't say what the journal's called, otherwise you'll get doxxed.
Yeah. Because my supervisor was like this Indian guy with a very, very long Indian name. So it's like it's either the white guy name or it's the Indian guy name. It's pretty obvious which one's mine.
What are the most common questions that guys ask you then?
I get a lot of guys asking me how to last longer in bed. That's one of the most frequent ones.
Let's address that one first then.
Yeah, and it's not as complicated as guys think it is. What we call premature ejaculation is actually a performance anxiety problem. It's an anxious problem, anxious physically and anxious mentally. So guys will carry a lot of tension in their pelvic floor, which is kind of like a good analogy for it is like having a gun half cocked already. It's much easier to set off, right? The trigger's easier to pull if you cock a classical revolver. So having a lot of tension in your pelvic floor is like being in that state where you're almost ready to explode. So guys can do a bunch of exercises to kind of relax a lot of that downstairs. Primarily things like reverse Kegels, which is if you were to try and describe how to do that exercise, it would be when you get up to go when you go to the toilet and you pee, it's like pushing the pee out faster. That physical feeling of pushing it out faster is actually you kind of pressing it down and relaxing all that musculature there under your pelvic floor.
It's like your gooch, basically, isn't it?
Basically, yeah. So that is technically a reverse Kegel when you're pushing down like that a bit more. That can help to relax all that muscle down there. Now you do want to do some regular Kegels as well to have a strong balance. You don't want a weak pelvic floor, but you want a relaxed one too. You want it to be healthy and strong but relaxed. So you can do you can do more reverse Kegels than you do regular Kegels, but you can also do regular Kegels, which is basically where if you were peeing, it would be like stopping the flow from coming out. That sort of clenching sensation, that is technically a Kegel, right? So we can start to build in a few like reps and sets every day. You just either do it in the shower or you do it while you're pissing. Like it's so easy to incorporate into your life without wasting a bunch of time. And it's not that. You don't have to spend ages doing it anyway. But that little bit like that will start to build up a lot of that pelvic floor musculature. It'll also help increase your erection strength as well, which is fantastic, but it also helps you last longer. And then the mental component of premature ejaculation is, again, like I said, it's an anxious mental state. So usually it comes down to having too much like adrenaline, too much cortisol, and too much of a thing called glutamate in your system. So
I learned about glutamate from TJ Power as well, the neuroscientist. Right. So yeah, okay. Talk more about it.
For me. It's good for me to hear that there's him and I are like overlapping on this stuff because he's the expert on that side of things too. So that's really cool. But glutamate is a excitatory neurotransmitter, right? So it produces these feelings of anxiety. It turns on the prefrontal cortex, that's the thinking part of your brain, which is not what you want in the bedroom. You don't want to have that thinking brain on all the time. You want to just relax and go with the flow and enjoy yourself.
Be more primal and
present, both of those things. And so, we actually get lots of glutamate in our system through a flavor enhancer called MSG.
Interesting.
Monosodium glutamate. It is the end of it's a salt, but it's the end of the salt. Because chemistry degree salts are two different positive and negative ions coming together, right? The glutamate component in MSG can stay in our system and can affect that, causing a baseline level of anxiousness higher than what it usually would be.
He was talking a lot about decision-making overthinking.
Right.
And I guess guys that get into the bedroom, they're maybe overthinking like, oh, what are we going to do now? Maybe they're inexperienced. I think premature ejaculation and experience are quite heavily linked.
Sometimes, yeah. You often get younger guys who haven't had experience or guys who've been on like a dry spell for ages. Like it's very common in that regard. But I've treated guys who've, like 40-year-old dudes, and it's just been a problem their whole life.
Interesting.
Right. And when you've got this sort of just baseline anxious state of being, what ends up happening is a guy is anticipating a bad outcome. So like maybe he had the way this sort of starts is the way that you end up in this really negative spiral. Like, guy is maybe inexperienced, has been on a dry spell, gets with the girl, is really excited to be with her, and he finishes too quickly. And then he develops a complex around it. Then he gets angry. Then the next time he's worrying about repeating that same bad performance. And like, fantastic. Now he's just created a negative trigger around sexual arousal. And the more this happens, the more
It's
instances.
a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's
Stirling.
exactly that. The more instances of that, the more the trigger seeps into the subconscious brain around, when I'm sexually aroused by a woman, I am nervous and anxious.
Well, interestingly, even like from my own head, there's particular positions where I'm more likely to finish because I've typically finished in that position more often.
Right.
And I know that. So when I'm in that position, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Unless I can regain sort of control and get out of that moment, then you're much more able to control yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that. It's kind of funny that it's really just an anxious turning on your prefrontal cortex response. So there's different things we can take supplement wise that can sort of help relieve a lot of that anxiety. Obviously, there's things we can do in our day-to-day life. So things like meditation are often very, very, they're always recommended for things like anxiety. But I find meditation to be very. Most guys aren't going to do meditation. Like, most of them aren't really. It's a bit too woo-woo for a lot of guys. It's a bit too much, like, it feels like you're doing nothing. I don't know, if you're like a type A guy who like just likes to get shit done, sitting around and just like without thought is like terrifying.
It's a hard switch.
It's like, what? Yeah, it's such a hard thing to do. So what I recommend for a lot of guys is actually just sparring. Because sparring is meditative. Meditation is just switching your brain off. Meditation is turning off your thinking brain. It's not necessarily just like you can be in a meditative state in a lot of different ways. And I think sparring is a great double-edged, like a multi-bonus way of doing that, because you shouldn't really be thinking when you're getting your face punched in, or if you're doing jiu-jitsu, right? You should kind of just be in the present, feeling with your body, like being in the moment like that, and that actually turns a lot of that off. And like once you've practiced sparring a bit here and there, like by comparison, it's this scenario of
Not
like
so daunting.
Yeah, it's not so daunting. Oh, whoop-de-doo, I finished a couple of minutes too soon or whatever, versus like I'm getting my head kicked in. Like, it's by comparison, reference experiences like that are good. And so I think that's a very practical, healthy way for guys to get into a meditative state in terms of like a lifestyle habit. In terms of supplementation, things like magnesium glycinate, very good for calming, relaxing the brain. Things like methylcobalamin, very good for reducing anxious thoughts and anxiety. Things like taurine, also very good because they're a building block to a chemical called GABA, and GABA is like a relaxing neurotransmitter. So there's a few things like this we can add in terms of supplementation.
It's interesting you mentioned relaxing, because you talked there about like high adrenaline, excited. That's why somebody's maybe like just going really, really quickly, whereas you're trying to maintain a level of control and calmness during sex that allows you to be more present, more relaxed, to do what you both want to do.
Completely. I mean, if you're going to have control over your body if you're relaxed, versus your brain having control over you. And funnily enough, there's a lot of a strong correlation actually between premature ejaculation and what we call performance anxiety. Performance anxiety induced erectile dysfunction. So, which is basically the dude's super, super nervous, and his old boy downstairs won't rise to the occasion, right? These two instances are very often often coexist, these two problems, because maybe he's too nervous, he can't get up, and then he gets it up for like 30 seconds and he finishes, right? Or he finishes too soon, and then the next time he has sex, he's worried about finishing too soon, so the anxiety stops him from being able to get an erection in the first place. They're highly linked to one another, which is why, getting our body relaxed, getting our body in a less anxious state. Also, funnily enough, the erection itself is actually a relaxation response. Like, this is why first thing in the morning, like for multiple reasons, but one of them is like morning wood is common first thing in the morning. Like, a lot of the times, like yawning can be associated with blood flow down there. Like, it's very much a relaxation response, and like the blood vessels literally have to relax and dilate to fill up like that, right? So sex should not be this tense, anxious experience. It should be a very relaxing flow state experience.
something that can make guys tense is a concern that he won't help her to finish. I guess that's one of the most common things that people ask you about too.
Yeah, they guys are a lot less selfish than people give them credit for the most part. Guys actually like to see their partner get off. They actually enjoy that. And to be fair, maybe it's a bit selfish because it's like it's an ego validating kind of thing. You know, you feel like the man if you can get your woman off.
Who gives it to you like this, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So it's but you don't. It's a bit of an ironic thing. It's a bit of a paradox. Like you want, in order for you to give her a good experience, you can't be hung up on giving her a good experience. You have to detach from the outcome, right? It's a bit of a spiritual woo-woo metaphysical like kind of concept, right? We're just talking about sex, but you need to detach from the ability. The you can't care, like you have to care without caring. Like you have to you want this outcome, but you have to not. You don't really give as much of a shit as you might have done in the past. And ironically, that kind of detachedness is going to allow your performance to be much better, which is more likely to get her off. But it's also going to create kind of, how do I say this in a polite way? Like a kind of asshole energy in your interaction.
I've got a term for it: aloofness. You're a little bit detached.
Yes, which is
you're being intimate, but you're not being needy about the intimacy.
Bingo. Very, very well said.
There we go. We're in sync now.
That's a very good way of saying it. Yes, you're not, because that neediness, like that, you're actually going to make things. This on so many levels. This work is this sort of correlates. If you are so desperate to make her finish, to get her off, women are very emotionally receptive creatures. She's going to feel that, and that is putting pressure on her. So now, congratulations, now you just put her in her head, and you made it infinitely harder for her to actually get off in the first place. Women want to be in this place in the bedroom where they can just switch their brain off. They want to get into their sort of subconscious mind, their primal like hind brain. Really, they don't want to be up here in the prefrontal cortex thinking brain. So when you don't put that pressure on her, you allow her to get back into that more subconscious flow state.
Right. From a pleasure perspective for her, how can we give her more pleasure?
I think the easiest way to give you all more pleasure is to tease it out of her, is to establish this dynamic of like having her beg for things like penetration, having her beg for things like your hand in certain positions, having her beg for different experiences. But at the same time, when you are building her up to, let's say, getting her closer and closer and closer to climax, denying her, like building her up and then taking it away, and like in a teasing, cocky, funny kind of way, but taking it away from her. Because what's going to happen is we can actually like build, because the female orgasm is like, think of it like a wave, like literally like a wave sign. You want to build a woman up and then bring her down again, and build her up even higher the next time, and build her up even higher the next time, until she eventually gets to this sort of tipping point where she climaxes, rather than. It's like a roller coaster can get, like when you get these sort of ups and downs, you can reach like a higher peak, versus like being in like a 4-wheel drive to like climb straight up a mountain. One has a lot less resistance than the other, right? And I think it's a more fun, more
You're
playful.
working more in tandem as well, aren't you?
You're working with her body in that regard, because that's very much, if a woman was going to describe to you the way she, like the feelings she gets when she orgasms, it would very much be described in terms of a wave. Yeah. So if you're building that up with teasing and denial, one, it's a psychological thing, because like you're establishing yourself as more of a dominant to her submissive nature. You're putting her in that headspace where she allows herself to turn off. You're in control now. She's relinquishing all control to you, and so you can build her up and deny her, build her up and deny her. And in my experience with the experiences of a lot of my clients, this has produced a lot of success.
I think one of the big misconceptions that guys have, and maybe one of the few benefits of women talking more about sexuality in the public domain, is that people now understand that it's not all about penetration. Because I think if guys just watch porn when they're younger, they just assume just go as hard and as fast as you can and get her there. Very rare.
Very, very rare. And it's
I think it's something like 1 in 5 women
Yeah,
can come from purely penetration.
You can teach a woman to do that. But it requires conditioning. You're not going to do it like if she's never had it before. It's not going to happen. It's probably not going to happen day one. Like, but you could together over the course of a relationship, you can absolutely teach that to a woman. And there's this idea that you get from porn of just like slamming it as hard and as fast as you possibly can. There's so many better ways of penetrating as well. That are like hitting the right sweet spots, getting the right angles, grinding, and focusing more on where you're hitting on her vaginal wall as you're coming in and out. Like there's a lot of different fun sensation spots inside that.
One of my friends, this was years ago, sent me your podcast with Mike Thurston, and you're talking about the pillow underneath the hips,
right? Yeah,
and game changer.
Yeah, it's little things, man. It's tiny little things. Like it's angles. It's sexual geometry plays a lot. You can just geek out on this, and that's like an 80-20 Pareto principle thing, like 80-20 principle, right? You could sit there and pound away for hours, or you just put a pillow under her hips. Like which one's easy to do? Which one's going to get you more results? Probably the pillow under the hips.
The other thing you spoke about in that podcast that I implemented was in cowgirl, rather than just up and down, more panning for gold was the phrase you used.
Yeah.
So how would you explain that?
Yeah, well, that's literally like imagine like an old timey like gold surveyor. What's he do? He puts gold in his little thing and he pans like this, back and forth like that, right? That you're doing that with your hand. While she's on top of you, you're doing that with your hands on her hips and on top of her thighs, basically, moving her back and forth like that. And what we're doing is we're getting the head of your penis to hit her G-spot, effectively, rather than it just sliding up and inside the vaginal canal. We're actually trying to hit those sweet spots.
And again, I think that's a misconception of porn, like the girl just riding on top and like, oh, like screaming the place down. You're like,
yeah.
Well, actually, that's not quite how it is.
Because that's visually it's visually appealing.
Of course, that's what it's being optimized for.
That's why we do it for the camera. But and what's visually appealing is very often not what feels good for a woman. In terms of just because a lot of what's going on is happening inside of her. A lot of the good feelings when we're doing things correctly, when you're doing things right, it's all just going on. It's all happening inside of her.
Also, so that hip movement as well. You're talking about your hands on her hips. It links again to like you being in charge and making things happen. You being in your dominant state, her being in her feminine, which is like polarity is attraction.
Completely.
And I think we've lost that in day-to-day society. But when we have it in the bedroom, you quite often see how comfortable women become in that environment.
They fall into their natural state of being. They want to be there, and it's like you're a modern woman. Like you're so in your head, and you're so you're high strung and you're anxious because you've got responsibilities, you've got rent to pay, you got a job to go to. It's a very masculine state of being for a woman. So the last thing she wants to do is come into a relationship, come into the bedroom with a guy and be in that headspace. If you're the guy who can lead her out of that, who can let her turn her brain off, let her relax, let her just go with the flow, like they fall into that submissive headspace. They fall into that feminine headspace so quickly.
How much of a role does communication play in that?
Well, see, I don't like this phrase of like, sex is like have better sex. You got to communicate, because I see like marriage counselors and like therapists and stuff say that all the time, and it doesn't really mean anything. Like if like you are asking a woman to communicate more, it doesn't like what does that even accomplish? Now you should know what turns her on. That's fine, but we're not communicating in the moment of having intercourse, right? That's a conversation that can happen as part of foreplay, maybe, or it can happen afterwards, or at some point,
or even like you're away on business and you're sexting, and she's a bit more open with you, so next time you're more connected.
Completely, yeah. That's a great thing to sex back and forth once that intimacy's already been established. But during the act of,
that's mad. By the way, the number of guys that are like just like trying to sex girls they've never met before, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, just do the thing.
the number of guys who are sending unsolicited dick pics is astounding. Like I'm a professional in that regard, and I don't send the dick pic. Like, what are you doing, guys? Like, come on.
It's not a very good looking thing, is it?
There's like
you're Johnson at half mast.
Well, is it like looks like the last chicken in the butcher shop? It's just like, what's it doing? Like, no one appreciates it.
It's for function, not aesthetics.
Exactly. So, how did we get on that topic? What were we talking about before that? We were talking about
communication.
Communication. The idea of communication, like. It's not. If in terms of communication that I think is optimal in that regard. It's more about you telling her what to do. It's what the communication is really one way. because you're leading the interaction.
What does that look like?
Well, it looks like grab it, bend over, put your hand here, do this, do that, say this back to me. Like, who's my good girl? Who does this pussy belong to? Things like this. Like, I'm doing all the instructing. I'm leading in that regard, right? So there is communication, yeah, but it's very deliberate sexual communication. It's not a conversation. Right? That's probably a better way of saying it. It's not a conversation.
Yeah, much like you were talking about the waves, it's the give and take from that sort of language as well.
Mm-hmm. It's very much. I'm a big proponent of this concept of like establishing dominant and submissive like frames and dominant and submissive situations, because I think that's just where we're naturally inclined to go. I think that's just the natural order of between men and women is they want to be submissive to a dominant guy. It's literally read any fantasy novel ever, and it's literally that. It's all that. It's all every fantasy novel ever is her being in a submissive position to a very dominant man.
I heard somebody say recently that the difference between 50 Shades of Grey being a romance novel and being like a sexual assault case was how successful Christian Grey is.
Yes.
And
his net
that's
worth.
very funny.
His net
because
worth.
if that was a guy in like his parents' basement, he's going to jail.
Quite literally. Yeah. Well, look. Is he? Maybe not. Maybe not. Like let's be a bit more optimistic about that. Because I think any guy can play that dominant role, right? Yeah. But ostensibly, if you're locking a girl up in a basement, yeah, you don't want to be doing it if you're broke. We don't want to be doing it at all if it's not consensual. But
well, status matters in the attraction as well, and I'm interested in your thoughts on the modern dating market.
Yes, things have been. The average guy has a lot bigger fight. He's competing with a lot more guys than I ever had to compete with when I was like in my 20s. I mean, now I'm still in the dating scene or whatever now, so I do have to compete with everybody. But I've had like a life to like establish who the fuck I am and build myself up and have some degree of status. So it's weird because if you look at all, you shouldn't necessarily get super hung up on status if you're not like trying to be some kind of an influencer, if you're not trying to be like to build, like have status in general, it's not necessarily the be all and end all. But I will say, like, let's say there's like 10 different like attraction switches you can flip on a woman, right? One of them might be like height, one of them might be good looks, one of them might be income, one of them might be, mystery and intrigue, one of them might be being charismatic, being confident, whatever, right? Let's just say we've got all these 10 different ones, and you got like status, or what you might also call social proof as one switch you can flip. You could probably have all of these other 9 turned off, but if you've got that one turned on, you'll be fine.
There's some that carry more weight than others.
It carries a lot more weight than anything else. Like social proof is the biggest influence on attraction. Doesn't mean you need, like, you can attract a woman with all these other things. Like she might not know anything. You can attract a woman who knows nothing about you by having a bunch of these other things. It is possible. So I think as a guy, you kind of have to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are, and you have to lean into it. Like engineer the game to your advantage. If you're a social guy, if your line of work or your skill set lends you to being a networker and lends you to having a big social circle and ideally with a bunch of women in it, lean into it, right? But if that's not your lifestyle, cool, you have to lean into something else. Yeah,
authenticity is such an overused buzzword online now, but it's really important you don't become, and this is a UK reference, like the Aldi version of somebody or like the B-Tech version of somebody else. Like,
I get the reference.
So as a podcaster, I'm not trying to be the B-Tech Chris Williamson. I'm just trying to do the best version of Colin, show up and iterate. Of course, I can borrow things that I see on other podcasts. I think, oh, I really like the way they do those clips, or I really like the way they do their intros, or that was a great question he asked that guest. I wonder if I can be more punchy with my questions.
Right.
Those are things that I can do in the same way if I'm looking to be more attractive to women, work with the raw materials I've got, rather than being like, okay, well, I'm going to try and be this guy.
Yeah. Don't fight it. Like, don't fight what nature's giving you. You know what I mean? Like, I've got a receding hairline. I lean into it. Like, I'm not sitting here I'm not going to Turkey and like getting my head.
I think Jason Statham did a lot for bald guys.
Bald guys,
like Jack bald guys.
Exactly. Yeah. Go Jason Statham.
What other things can men do to do better in the dating market?
Oh, I think looking at yourself as a brand helps. So obviously a lot of dating is done online, obviously through dating apps things, but also like Instagram is a dating app, and it's kind of like it's both like a dating app and it's like your your professional card, like, you know, your business card in a lot of ways, and especially in terms of dating. So like if a guy doesn't have like if he's just if he's just a regular Joe and he doesn't have an Instagram profile or whatever, right? It's kind of harder for him to compete with attention because women are on their phone all the time. Like, you might as well set up an Instagram profile. It doesn't take that much effort. It doesn't take that much time to set up a good Instagram profile. You don't have to post on it all the time. You don't have to be a content creator. But you can create an Instagram profile that presents your best self, the best version of yourself. And if you think of yourself as like from a business perspective, a lot of guys are a very good product. Like they're in shape, they've got good relationships, they've got good banter, whatever, they make good money, whatever, right? But their marketing is trash. They don't know how to sell themselves. And I look at the Instagram profile as like a marketing aspect of yourself. So if you can just take the best aspects of yourself, if you learning how to take a good photo is like 90% of it, honestly. And a lot of guys don't know how to take a good photo. So look at guys like Mike Thurston. He's a great example. Look at guys like Mike Thurston. Look at guys like Justin Waller. I'm not too bad. I'm not going to try and blow my own trumpet here. But the two guys I just mentioned before me are both ridiculously handsome. But ignore the handsome part for a second. They're also very, very good at taking a photo.
The aesthetics of it. The
composition of a photo. And if there was here's like the Pareto's principle of getting a good photo. Have a lads weekend or have a lads night out together, do something fun, organize some cool event, activity or whatever together, and hire a photographer, but tell the photographer to basically hide in the bushes. Nobody pose for a photo. Have them taking
candid, not planned.
Bang. Candid photos of you guys laughing, shooting the shit, holding court, like talking, whatever. Like you will get infinitely better photos from that than trying to take like an Andrew Tate pose and you're like, you've never taken a photo before.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
triangle hands.
Yeah, like you don't try to, and that you don't try to copy, don't try to be another dude, right? If you don't know how to pose for a photo, you're gonna look really fucking awkward. And women can tell. Like if I can tell by looking at a dude's profile, like he ain't ever posed for a photo before, a woman can definitely tell.
Yeah, they're far more in touch with this stuff.
Exactly. So they can, and body language communicates so much about you. So that's why if you're with your boys having a fun time and someone's taking photos of you candidly, you're gonna look confident, you're gonna look fun, you're gonna look social. There's layers of like things being sub-communicated there, which are all in your favor. And that's a great way to, that's I think the simplest way for guys to learn how do I get good photos? That's how you get good photos. Simple. That's such a simple way of doing it.
That's from a marketing perspective. What about from a product perspective in terms of how you should be?
Well, the product perspective is all the things you're working on simultaneously. So are you building your career? Are you building your business? Are you building your net worth, your income? Are you building your social circle? Are you building your network? Are you hitting the gym? Are you staying healthy? Are you eating right? Are you learning how to dress better? Are you learning a sense of style and a sense of style that fits you and your aesthetic? These are the product, right? And then obviously, to a degree that comes with that is like, what's your relationship like with your family? What's your relationship like with your friend circle? Because that's ultimately the product that she's buying into, is the lifestyle that you have. Is your lifestyle one that is attractive? And it doesn't mean that you have to visit 5-star restaurants and fly around the world and things like that. It can be as simple as, I have a great group of friends. We've all got each other's back. We have a great time together. When we go, we have a laugh and we go do fun shit together. That's relative. That's equally as attractive, by the way, as the jet setting, digital nomad thing.
We got introduced by Oliver Anwar, who's been on the podcast a couple of times. Great guy. Spent a lot of time with him in Dubai recently. And we were talking on the last podcast we did together about, I came home from being in Ibiza in September and hadn't been messaging any girls at home. And I had loads of girls just replying to all my stories. And I was like, what's happened? But it's because I've been away having fun, been totally abundant.
Right.
And I came back with this energy of just being light and chill and feeling good. And I wasn't chasing it.
Yeah.
It just looked like I was having fun. I was on the balcony at Ushuaia. Like it was great. And then I come home and it was like, oh, like, what are you up to? What are you doing? And I'm like, oh, this is odd.
Yeah.
But it's when you're not chasing it, but you just appear to be having a great time. Energy can be really attractive.
Well, that's also if you're posting stuff on your stories about like what you're doing, that's also marketing, right? You're literally displaying, like I said, that lifestyle that she wants to buy into, right? It's like, oh, he's chilling out with his friends. He's having a great time. He's being very healthy. He's doing this. He's doing that. I want to buy into that lifestyle. That's effectively, it's exactly what they're DMing me.
On the reverse, what are you vetting for in a female?
A bunch of stuff. It depends. This obviously depends upon everyone individually. But for me, it's like things. Does she like animals? It's like, I'm a guy who wants to have a farm. If you don't like animals, that's going to be a problem, right? Dogs, chickens, that sort of stuff. You've got that kind of. Do you have a nurturing aspect to you? Do you like babies? Literally, do you like babies? Like, do you get kind of googly eyed when you're around a kid? That's a big one because I don't want a woman who's not interested in having a family. Do you? Obviously, like I don't really care that much about like education, but are you intelligent? Like, can you in particular? I think this one thing kind of answers a lot of questions simultaneously. Is like, did she take the COVID jab?
Yeah.
No, I know.
Well, women are more agreeable than men, so I think percentage-wise, more women took the jab.
But it's also a case of like, can you critique like what you're being like? Can you be told something by mainstream media and like call out bullshit sometimes? Or maybe it ties into that. Did she have a father figure who she listened to who told her not to? That's pretty important too. So that also ties into what's her relationship like with her dad. What are her parents still married? Are her parents still together? Like how's this dynamic play out? What are her friends like? Are they a bunch of like club going hoes? Or are they a bit more like chill, bit
more wholesome, Pilates and yoga rather than nightclubs?
Does she have a healthy lifestyle? Does she exercise and work out regularly? Does she know how to cook? Is she eating healthy? These are like now like I can sit here and reel off like 2 dozen things. Am I going to find someone who ticks every single box? No, we're not. But some things have, like we said, with the switches we're flipping, some things have more weight than others, right? And so it's, as a guy, it's like a case by case basis. I think too many guys, especially online, and maybe on Twitter, like anons on Twitter, and that maybe fans of people who watch a lot of red pill content, they have these like super high expectations of women without looking themselves in the mirror and being like, well, am I worthy of demanding all of these things? Yeah. And of course, and even then, like you're going to have to compromise at some point, and you're going to have to because no woman is going to come perfect for you. You're going to have to build her into your wife. You're going to have to build her into your partner. Like this is true of everybody.
And as you said, turn the mirror in yourself. You're probably not the finished article either. There's probably things that you do that you could improve on, and being with the right woman, you can work on those things together. But there's big boxes that you want to tick, and there's some non-negotiables which I can completely relate to.
Yeah. So, and especially because like I know what I want. I know that I want a family and stuff. So like, does she like kids? Pretty fucking high up on that list.
Yeah, agreed, Stirling. Well, I've had tremendous fun today's conversation. Hope you have as well.
Love it.
If you want to continue the conversation, I'm sure the listeners are going to be sliding into your DMs. Where should they head towards?
You can go on to Instagram. You type in Stirling Cooper, at Stirling Cooper. You'll find me. Stirling spelled like you spell it here in Scotland. STIR.
Nice, not like the pound sterling.
Exactly. That's where I got it from, actually. So Stirling Cooper on Instagram. On Twitter or X, I am at Stirling Wisdom. And YouTube, if you type in Stirling Cooper, you'll find my channel. I'm the first thing that comes up.
Amazing, Stirling. Those will all be linked in the show notes. Thank you to you, and thank you to the listener as well. I'll be back to speak to you guys again very, very soon.